Cover 0% interest free, cashback, and so much more. Buying a house? Save up to 30% on home insurance and additional discounts if you pair with your new car. It's crazy this holiday season at TDC Insurance with our TDC Insurance Holiday Extravaganza. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Buying your medication is easy with City Drug Store's curbside pickup. WhatsApp our certified pharmacist at 662-8769 with your requests. For prescriptions, take a clear photograph and send for review. We will engage you in dialogue and then provide a quotation and link for payment. You can then pay via TDC's online payment portal. And once the transaction is complete, you'll be notified that your pickup is ready. Yes, it's that easy. Send your WhatsApp message to 662-8769 to order your medications today with City Drug Store's curbside pickup service.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
listeners, and welcome to Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. I am your host this morning, Kevon Brown. Welcome to another edition here. It's a beautiful Saturday out there. The sky is very much blue. I was actually looking at it before I came on the air. Sun is out, sky is blue, looking great. Temperature is actually really nice too, not too hot. Well, not as yet. And it is the start of December. The year is basically over. 2022 is basically over because, as we know, as soon as December starts, that is kind of it for the year because it gets swallowed up by preparations for Christmas, preparations for Carnival. Carnival had their official launch last evening, the official opening last evening. The rest of 2022 is going to fly by, and here comes 2023 with its new set of blessings and challenges, opportunities. So I hope we're all ready for that. We're gonna play a little bit. Former politician and social activist Dwight Astvan, he recently did a commentary. So we're gonna hear a bit of his commentary on what he had to say on the state of the nation this week. So stay tuned for that.
Greetings. The government is involved and has for many years been involved in a number of programs which are referred to as social safety net programs. The purpose of these programs is to provide financial and social assistance to people in need. One such program is the STEP program, under which people are employed in both the public and private sectors. And they and their payroll contributions, such as Social Security, are paid by the government. There are about 2,600 people on STEP. And by my reckoning, the program costs the government, the taxpayers, that's you and me, about $60 million a year. The 2,600 STEP workers represent about 1 in every 12 workers in this country. That is a high number. And the majority of people on STEP are under the age of 45, which really means that 2,600 of our workers who are in the prime of their productive lives are on a job subsidy program STEP. There could hardly be anything more dangerous for a country when that many of its people, worse yet, that many of its younger people are on a job subsidy program. If a tiny country like ours is properly and efficiently governed, if its people are well trained educationally and socially, if economic and social opportunity exists for all, a program like STEP, while it might still be necessary, would be small, and the people enrolled in it would only be on it for a brief period, and then they would move on. And it certainly would not cost $60 million a year, money which can be used for other vital things in the country. And the governmental efficiency and good leadership would not only save the taxpayers all of this money, it would also create a more productive environment for the economy and society. More job and entrepreneurial opportunities. More wealth for people. So more money in the economy. more money in Social Security, more money in the banks. It's all good. Very simple and logical, isn't it? So why have previous administrations not done this? The bald truth is that the country was not being particularly well governed, especially over the last 7 years. If it were, then we wouldn't have this STEP program having so many people on it. We wouldn't have, prior to STEP, that's pre-2015, we would not have had the PEP program. And prior to that, the YES program. All of this going back to about 2005 or 6. A continuous job subsidy program for the last 17 or so years. Getting bigger, not getting smaller. More people on it rather than less. And not enough people graduating to better jobs, better work situations, entrepreneurship, economic and social advancement. These are all signs of failure. And today we're not only where we started back then, I believe we are behind because of what I've just said. In the meanwhile, some callous employers have exploited the STEP program, enjoying free labor and paying no social security. I'm not talking about struggling little businesses. I'm talking about established businesses which are freeloading on the government and on the country. And when the government gets shafted, it is always the small man and woman who get the worst of it. Dr. Drew and his team have a lot of mess to clean. And it's not just a mess in terms of incompetence by former leaders. It is also a mess of corruption, as any quick examination of the record will show. Can you imagine people living abroad on this STEP and on other programs? Now there's another program called PAP, PAP, which was introduced by the last administration to provide financial assistance in the sum of $500 a month to households earning less than $3,000 a month. Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, our Deputy Prime Minister, gave a very revealing national address on this a few days ago. He said that there are 7,469 households on the PAP program. 7,469 households are more than 1/3 of all of the households in the nation. So tell me, how can St. Kitts Nevis be regarded as a successful country when more than 1/3 of our households nationally have to rely on a monthly subsidy from the government? That is to say, a monthly subsidy from the taxpayers. That's you and me. And if 7,469 households are getting $500 a month, that means that the taxpayers, you and me, have to fork out $45 million a year on the PAP. Now, is it okay for households to receive government financial assistance to survive? Absolutely yes, it is okay. But if in a population of 50,000 people, more than 1/3 of all of our families are receiving this financial support, then people are nowhere near as well off as we might want to think. Or maybe there has been a lot of corruption, and maybe the correct number of households should be a lot less, but for the corruption, which is exactly the case, because there is a lot of corruption in the PAP program, as Deputy Prime Minister Hanley pointed out in his address. Among other very revealing things, he said that 100 public servants with salaries well over the $3,000 were on PAP. And he pointed to other situations to show evidence of corruption. Now, something needs to be done with regard to the people's money, which those public servants got from the PAP that they should not have gotten. And if any minister or any other public officer authorized or directed that such payments be made to persons who are not eligible to receive those payments, that minister and or other public officer should be made to pay back every cent to the government. So STEP is taking 60 million a year and PAP is taking 45. So far, 105 million a year in two programs. And just that you would know, there are people who are on both programs. This is part of the mess that needs to be cleaned up and is being cleaned up, we are told. Then there's a third program called the Alternative Lifestyle Program, better known as the Peace Program. There are about 1,000 people on this program, ranging in ages between the late teens and the 40s. Like the STEP, mostly younger people, people who are at the prime age range of productivity. But 1,000 of them are on this social and economic rescue and reform program, intended to bring young persons, mostly, who are on the edges of society or already over on the wrong side, back into the fold and into responsible and productive citizenship. By my reckoning, this program costs the taxpayers about $35 million a year. So if you add up all three, you're looking at about $140 million a year. That's a lot of money and makes up a significant portion of our annual national budget. Also note that the 1,000 people on the Peace Program represent 2% of our national population. This is not a flattering statistic. Yes, it is good and it is necessary to provide assistance and guidance to our young people so that we will help them get on the right track. But when we have a program which by itself in Little St. Kitts and Nevis has 1,000 of our young, strong, and in many cases very bright citizens, then we have a big problem in this little country. A problem whose origins, as I've indicated before, go back to the 1980s, and which were allowed to fester over the decades. A wise person once said that if you want to get an idea as to what the future of a country will be like, take a look at the country's youth today. What type of picture do you get when you think of the STEP, the PAP, and the Peace Program? I would not deny for a moment that they have been beneficial to people. But I will also state that the best test of success of programs like these is, one, whether they not only advance the cause of the young citizens who are on them, graduating those young people out of the program and onto self-reliance and higher social and economic productivity and stability, in the process reducing the number of people on the program. And two, whether the program advances the cause of the nation as a whole. And that is very important, because it is the nation's money being invested in the nation's youth. Necessary, but it must be properly done. And the youth must benefit sustainably, and the country must benefit sustainably. And in my humble opinion, with so many people still on these programs, with relatively little sign of attitudinal reform, and apparently not very much movement from the mentality of entitlement and dependency, and similarly, very little evidence of the unleashing of the enormous intellectual, social, cultural, and economic potential of our people. These programs have not achieved the level of success that they could and should have. These programs and others, such as the Hurricane Roof Repair Program, have been abused for political gain and have been corrupted. Imagine there were grandmothers and little children on the peace program. Who put them there? Imagine one person's almost entire family was on it. And no effort was made to clean it up by those who could and should have. In fact, they messed it up. The messers are not usually the cleaners. Now, Dr. Drew and his team have to address these issues. Yes, we need programs to help our people who are in need. But these programs must be carefully and cleanly managed, and there must be set goals for the benefit of the participants and for the nation. One of the most critical issues and challenges for Dr. Drew and his team in addressing these issues is the attitude of dependency and entitlement. Too many of us are living off too few of us. Too many are being allowed to take advantage of the system. But in truth and fairness, too many have been taken advantage of by the same system, which has been headed by politicians who did not have the wisdom and the will and perhaps the integrity to do the right thing for the young and the poor and the nation as a whole. What has been happening, these programs as they existed up to now, these things are not sustainable. So, Dr. Drew and his team have a major challenge on their hands to get the attitudinal change effected. Once that is done, the rest is going to be pretty much gravy. But that to me is the major hurdle. Get our people to be more enterprising, more independent-minded, and more civically energized. And this is what we want, and this is what we need. With those words, I wish you farewell until next time, and let us deal with these issues. Thank you very much.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
This holiday season, a loan from TDC Financial Services is for me and for you. Up to $85,000 for any purpose. So you know, top up for my food business, repairs on the house, and all the styles for Sugar Mass 51. And of course, sorting out my kids for back to school. Hear what my friend had to say about her experience.
Girl, I love to get my holiday loan at TDC Financial Services. It is less hassle and you get the loan fast.
So you see, TDC Financial Services is the place to get what you need this Christmas. A loan for me and a loan for you. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go round.
welcome back to Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. I'm your host this morning, Kevon Brown. And before the break, you were listening to a little commentary from former politician Dwyer Astafan, and he was, addressing the state of the social assistance programs as they stand. And based on his numbers, he's saying that it's $140 million bill on the government. And he's questioning the longevity of the program, the sustainability of the program, and, how the programs were regulated. I'm joined with Jermaine Abel, another local journalist. He writes for SKM Vibes. The man been traveling the world and doing his journalist thing. You're not wrong. So, Jermaine, have you listened to Astafan? He's dying in there. Have you listened to Astafan's new commentary?
Yes, Mr. Brown. I listened to bits and pieces of Dwyer's commentary, and to be honest, he made valid points in there, and the overall question that's coming out of that is it sustainable based on the amounts, the 140 million that he raised? Is it sustainable for us to continue to foot that bill? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should not assist people, but one of the gist of what I'm getting from Dwyer is, and any economist, or I don't want to say an economist, but generally from an economic perspective, they would ask you, they would highlight the issue that the country's backbone are those people between the ages of 18 and 45, right? And based on the figures and what Dwyer highlighted in his commentary, the backbone of St. Kitts and Nevis, a lot of that backbone is on the social programs. Yeah. So then that raises the question about St. Kitts and Nevis from an economic perspective, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line, from an economic perspective, and also from a social security perspective, if you have the bulk of those people, the backbone of St. Kitts and Nevis, actually being on social programs. So I think the commentary was on point from Dwyer, and it is something that we in St. Kitts and Nevis have to look at going forward.
There are two things that jumped out to me the most when I was listening to that commentary. It's the fact that, as you mentioned, a bulk of the backbone of the economy, the backbone of St. Kitts and Nevis, that will be the backbone for the next 10 years going forward, have been on the social assistance programs, and that reflects on the availability of jobs, the issue of minimum wage, on all of those other issues that have been brought up. And it also begs the question, well, if all of them don't actually belong on the social assistance program, then what happened to the regulation of the program? Who's been regulating the program for the past few years? So it's a two-pronged hit right there.
You've raised some serious questions there, Kevon. The overview of the program, and it also goes into the general discussion that we're supposed to be speaking on. Yes. But when you ask the questions from a media perspective, you do not get the full response. Right? You do not get the complete answer. A lot of information was not necessarily readily available to address those questions that you were asking there. The oversight of the program, how many people were there, who were put on 2 months ago, 3 months ago, who were on a year ago, who graduated from the program. So the answers to these questions were not readily available. But for me, right, the major concern is what is going to happen now. Because you have, and that's what the figure that Astafan gave is just for the 3 programs. And if you can recall, and I don't know if the public can recall, at the PLP's press conference during the elections campaign, the then Prime Minister, gave a figure in terms of how many social assistance programs were in place in St. Kitts and Nevis. And if my memory is correct, he said about 28. I'm not good with math.
28?
Right, I'm not good with math, Kevin. I'm not going to try to calculate the rough figure.
The rough figure of
how much is being spent on those social programs.
Because we need to know the number of people who are on those programs. How many of those people, and that begs another question, because I'm sure we've all heard the musings of the people that have been doubling up on social assistance programs. And like, what qualifies you for social assistance programs? If you're already on a social assistance programs, does that hinder you from accessing another one? Is there a cap, a threshold? That's another issue.
You're raising pertinent points there, because we heard from, I think when the PAP program was launched, there's going to be a slight graduation. Likewise, with the STEP program, there's going to be a graduation from people being on STEP to the
full-time employment
in the private sector.
Or the public sector, because some of them work with the government, yes.
Yes. So are those still, we have not gotten any figure in terms of how many people graduated from those programs, right? But then a bigger question comes up for me, Kevin, right? And I think we all know the answer to this question. If we're spending $140 million roughly based on the figures that, Astafan gave, where is the funds coming from for these assistance programs, right? Taking into account that we had a pandemic in 2020.
Which still affected us very much in 2021.
Exactly, and it still rolled over again into 2022. Even though, the IMF, World Bank, and others are estimating that St. Kitts and Nevis' economy will grow by just about double figures.
But then they had to shrink it back, didn't they? Because Russia invaded Ukraine.
The last figure that we were told it is double figures.
Is double figures?
Yes, and this is dependent, I think it's 10-point-something% or thereabout, or just under that.
Oh, I thought it was down to like 6.
Well, from the last figure that I saw.
Okay.
Well, from what the IMF said to us at its annual meeting back in October. Right, I'm going based on that figure because I have not seen any additional updates since then.
Well, I don't think they've put out any official update, but I think they said the general consensus is that it has to be, the growth for 2023 has to be revisited.
Yes, the growth for 2023 will shrink. It will not be the same this year, just about what you're saying there. Right, but generally speaking, St. Kitts and Nevis for 2022 will see just about a 10% growth. Now, the question is, if we are actually going to, will we generally know that the idea that a lot of the monies that we use for these social programs actually come from the CBI program? Yes, people can criticize me for saying that, right? But in general terms, that is where the money comes from, right? It basically props us up, right? Now, the IMF is saying to St. Kitts and Nevis and other territories across the region who, that basically have these buffers, right? Because that's a specific question that I asked of the IMF, IMF World Bank, at a press conference. What would you tell countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and everybody who got these programs, and we spend a lot from it? They said, listen, you guys have to stop spending and put it up for a rainy day. In 2020, it was good for a rainy day because we had COVID. Likewise in 2021. But as we begin to rebound, or we're at the stage of rebounding right now, we have to begin to say, okay, we have to cut back this, we may have to cut back a bit of that, or something, because we don't know what 2023 holds. And their statement came against the backdrop of them expecting the inflationary rate to continue, right, and a possible recession in the U.S., right? So all of these challenges can impact us financially. And again, they were saying, a couple of the officials that we interviewed, they said, hey, if the U.S. goes into a recession, and I think you guys had it on your news as well, the governor of the ECCB, he said, if there's a recession in the U.S., obviously it means that Kevon can't send money for his children in St. Kitts. Kevon ain't gonna get the same disposable income that he had before. If Kevon, things become tight and, inflation balloons again, it simply means that spending will have to be cut by a certain amount. And that means that people will not want to travel as much from the U.S., which is a major source market for St. Kitts and Nevis. So taking all these things into consideration, the IMF is saying, hey, let us a little bit cut back on some of the spending that we were doing and save that money for a rainy day.
I think that's been the general consensus for real, to save money for a rainy day, because we really don't know what 2023 might hold, because 2022 was supposed to be the light at the end of the tunnel, the COVID-19 pandemic tunnel. And then in February, as soon as things started to get a little bit better, Russia decided, no, we're gonna, maybe we do need something else to challenge us in this new 20s.
And then we had the issue of the supply chain.
And it was only made worse, actually. It was only made worse, and it continues to be worse, to be quite honest.
But you're correct, though. We don't know what 2023 holds, and I think before any judgment or aspersions are cast, we should wait to hear what's going to be said in the 2023 budget.
Right.
I know nothing has been said yet when that will happen. But I guess the government would have had consultations with the private sector and some civil society organizations on exactly what their expectations are, what are the challenges facing St. Kitts and Nevis, to see a significant rebound despite the challenges. But then we also still have to take into consideration the triple-demic.
The triple-demic, I like that one.
In the U.S., COVID, flu, and there's another one that they're looking at right now. So you have to take all of these, and it's not the significant winter period as yet in the U.S. Right? And I asked the PM the other day whether or not we're looking and taking that into consideration as we head into the significant part of the tourism season. He said, they're still going to be monitoring COVID and the flu and the other one. Monkeypox. So all of that has to be taken into consideration as we head into 2023, because nobody, again, expected COVID in 2020. I mean, everybody, we had plans to go here, there, and everywhere, jetting around the world, celebrations, but then the brakes were pulled.
Indeed. We're also joined by Andre Huey. Good morning, Mr. Huey. I invited the Media Association, the St. Kitts and Nevis Media Association, this morning to talk about, the Freedom of Information legislation, the upcoming amendments to the Integrity in Public Life, as well as the anti-corruption bill, to see how, we think these things are going to work, what challenges may persist in the how shall I say this, the operationalization of these three things, how they might clash, might not clash. Mr. Huey, before we get into that, did you hear Mr. Astafan's latest commentary about the social assistance programs?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kevon. Yeah, I did listen a bit of it. I didn't get to complete the entire commentary. I was actually almost close to finishing, but sometimes when you have multitasking, but I was listening to it. I listened most of it, and of course the issues he raised are quite pertinent issues, and actually issues that, quite frankly, have been raised prior to even this administration and even the last one, because if you realize in his commentary he spoke about the YES program, which existed in the mid 2000s, then that transferred to the PEP program a few years later, and then that was changed to the STEP program. We still have these programs. And I agree with him that, yes, you have a situation where you should, and the people of the country should benefit from the improvements in the economy, primarily through the CBI program. And the Prime Minister also said so himself before he announced the double salary in his last press conference. The people of the country must benefit substantially from the economic benefits that come to the country. At the same time, you also have to assess your programs and to see whether or not, if they're one, I mean, you don't want to deny anybody assistance from the government, but if there are people who are on the program who, by the very nature of their state of affairs, what they earn, etc., should not be in the program, then they should be off the program, because there are a lot of other people who are in need, who probably should be on that program. Secondly, I've always wondered about these programs in terms of the longevity and the sustainability.
We were just raising that.
Yeah, how long can we sustain and take care of and sustain these programs? And I'm going to go back to what the Prime Minister said at his first press conference, because I asked him the question based on what Jermaine raised in terms of what the IMF said at their press conference just a few days prior. And essentially, I was just looking back at the report to refresh my memory. He essentially said, well, look, while we take what the IMF is saying and we understand what they're saying and we take it seriously, at the same time, the entities like the IMF and the World Bank should begin properly assessing countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, not just as high-income countries, not just based on your per capita, but based on the MVI, the Multi-Vulnerability Index. Because while we may be doing well economically, we are also exposed to shocks, external shocks, some of it caused by natural disasters through climate change, which we have no contributions to at all, and we are suffering as a result of that. So while you're telling us to tighten our belt, at the same time, consider us in this context as well, so that we can get grants and we can get access to concessionary loans, so that we can take care of our people. So in one hand, he's basically saying, yes, we're going to take your word seriously, but at the same time, consider these other factors as well, because we don't have the access to concessionary loans or grants to get the kind of funding we need so that we can take care of our people. But I do agree with Mr. Astafan. The programs need to be properly assessed to ensure that they're serving the people who they really should serve, and that people who are on the program, who are not supposed to be on the programs, should actually be weaned out. And I think that's what essentially the Deputy Prime Minister said last week, which is why we are seeing now the PAP program, there's a new application process all over again.
And that, when going back to what you said previously, it brings up a question. If proper regulation isn't done on these programs, we can just see these programs getting new facelifts every so often.
But Kevin, I think even if you do that, right? Because I don't know what the program is like, but based on the initial idea surrounding the programs and the plan for the program is, and this again goes back to the economy. You're supposed to be graduating from the program,
right?
But I can't exactly remember what systems were in place for people to graduate from the program. But now, how do we guarantee that if we have 50 people on this program, that at least 2, 5, 10, 15 will graduate from this program? And I think that generally has not been answered. Right. I know this is the early stages of the current administration, but for me, that is a question that has to be answered.
Well, I think the Deputy Prime Minister sort of answered the question in that there is no system in place for that. If you look at the PAP program, for example, he basically indicated there is no system of a graduation from the program. It is almost as if it's assistance infinitum, which it can't be, because the program is not going to be sustainable if that's the case.
Yeah, but you have to find some way, because you just
exist at the moment. That's the answer to your question.
Because then it makes the PAP and STEP programs not sustainable. Because if you're going to tell me you have 50 people on this program and it's costing you X, it means that 50 people will be benefiting from the program until we decide that, hey, the program isn't sustainable anymore.
But I think we're focusing a lot on the programs themselves. The social assistance programs will always be around. Welfare has always existed, period. The problem is getting people off of welfare. That is the issue.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, right, Kevin? Does our economy have the space where if Jermaine sets up a business now, he can hire 50 people? Do we have organizations that will be able to say, I'm going to offer these people $3,000 a month minimum, so we're going to wean them off of the social programs, right? I think that it comes back again to the economy, because for us to have, I think, 2,600 households or something like that benefiting from these programs highlights that there's some level of deficiency somewhere in the economy that the government has to step in to fill that hole in the gap there.
I think I have an idea on what that deficiency is, but I might be stepping on a little bit of a land because there's this fight right now, from what I have witnessed and whatnot. There's this fight right now of between qualifications and experience, because for certain positions, the expectations is for you to have this degree, and not just have this degree, have these years of experience doing these type of things. So filling those positions is already a difficult task. Now, when you consider the pay scale for filling those positions and the pay scales under for people who are either qualified, who have experience, or who have both qualifications and experience, if the majority of our people don't have either or, the pay scale for them will be decreased, would it not?
I agree with that. Sometimes, and this is the argument, sometimes businesses, I don't want to say ask for unrealistic stuff, but...
I mean, you could say it.
No, some organizations, they ask you for example, so Kevin might be a journalist for 15 years. Let's backpedal. A young man just comes out of school and he's looking for a job. He went to CFBC. Let's say he got qualifications in, let's say something random, journalism, right? And German owns this entity and he puts out a vacancy for a journalist. But he wants 5 years of experience and a bachelor's degree in communications. Realistically, that young person will not be qualified for it. So then that young person says, okay, I'm going to take the first job that comes up. That I can get, not what suits my qualification or my liking. So then he might decide, hey, I'm not punishing these people, but I'm just going to go work in a supermarket until something else comes up.
Pops up, yeah.
Or I go and I become a pump attendant, but I still want to work in the media realm. Where do I get the experience from to say I can get 5 years of experience? And I think that's some of the challenges, one of the challenges that young people coming out of high school, coming out of CFBC,
even coming out of university,
they actually face in the job market. And it's not limited to St. Kitts and Nevis only.
No,
I've had friends who tirelessly complain across the region that some of it's not possible for some of what the businesses are asking for.
And the truth be told, and I'm coming from an employer's perspective, I see where you're coming from, Jeremy, because I've been there as well. When I left school, I also had difficulty getting work. So I understand. At the same time, from an employer's perspective, the employer is also not going to want to babysit.
Right.
Because you see, you could come out with a degree, but you may not have the competence.
Exactly.
And in fact, study after study has shown that a lot of college graduates, unfortunately, university graduates, are coming out with the academic qualification, but they don't have the practical competence to carry out the task.
Right.
And it's not something that's unique to St. Kitts Nevis. It's all over. So that's one of the challenges. The other challenge too, I think, is that what probably needs to happen is that you have a situation where you probably have more a supply and demand situation. So you have more people competing for jobs than jobs that are actually available. And of course, to generate more jobs, what you would need is more people taking the step of entrepreneurship and deciding, well, instead of me coming out of school looking for work, I'm going to go into the business field, start a business, and see if I can be in a position where several years down the line I can employ.
And also taking a risk to not follow what everybody else is doing, because then you'll...
Then you'll end up, in a very competitive field and won't make it. But then aside from that, this is where I think now some of the funds that are generated or directed to social programs, or basically funds that are, available, can be directed in this particular area in terms of entrepreneurship support.
Well, I think that's what they're trying to do with the small business development program.
The small business development program.
No. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly jump back. I agree with the first point that you were making, that businesses want experienced people because they look at it from a dollar and cents perspective. If I hire a young person now, I either have to train them or they have to understudy someone, and that will cost time, and time costs money, and then you can do the practical breakdown and all of that. Right. But that's another argument that we can go into. But in terms of business, one of the things that I find weird in St. Kitts and Nevis is that a lot of people look for the easy way out instead of partnering with other people. Trust me, Kevin, Andre, we all know this. The easiest business that you can do in St. Kitts, but two businesses that you can do in St. Kitts, and I'm not punching anybody. I love to see people being independent. Is somebody's going to come with the idea, no. What do you want to do? Let me say the small business opens and they say, okay, are we looking for applications for small businesses? Two things will definitely come up, and they always will come up. Selling food and selling clothes. Right. The question you have to ask yourself is it sustainable?
Well, people always eat. That's a given.
Yes.
The question is not even so much selling food, is how are you different? Because that's what makes business successful.
That's the point I was about to make.
100 people could sell food.
Yes.
But if you come into the market with something different, you could target a market or aspect of the market, of course, providing you do your research and business, all the things you need to do to prepare yourself for going into business. Because guess what? Since COVID, I've known several people who have gone and started selling food, whether it be they sell it from the house or they go out and they get somewhere. And some of them are actually doing well.
I'm like I said, I'm not punishing.
Right. So some of them are actually doing it. So the point is not the fact that they're selling food.
It's
the
how
point
they're different.
is how are you different?
Not to mention.
How are you making a
Not to mention,
business?
German, if a McDonald's or Wendy's touched down in St. Kitts and Nevis because a group of people, imagine a group of young people decided, hey, let's all 10 of us go and get a collective loan, buy this franchise and bring it in St. Kitts and Nevis because we know it'll kill St. Kitts and Nevis. It's food nonetheless. It's fast food.
But Kevin, you see what you're saying there, right? You're saying a collective. So
right.
and that's
coming
not
together.
What's happening.
And I agree with
lot.
you on that. I agree with you on that.
I'm like I said, I'm not bashing. I'm not kicking anybody who's in the food business. You can go into it. Like I said, I love to see people being independent, right? But for me, right, I think two things. One, people can diversify their thinking in terms of what they want. Like I said, a lot of people surviving and a lot of people are successful right now in doing hair braiding. They have their market, right? A lot of people are doing sewing. They have their market. Likewise, the food, they have their market. But people are not thinking outside the box of, and I'll also look and I admire the people who are doing makeup, right? Because I realize they're expanding right now, and that is good, right? But let us think outside the box. Let us think how I can sit down now, if I launch a business in 2022, by 2020 or by 2030, I want to own I must have an operations on 4th Street. I must be able to hire 15, 50, 30, 40, 100 people.
I must have a branch on Nevis.
Exactly. So it's just for me that you can think outside the box and think long term. And not just that, because like I said, I respect everybody. I know how people, like I said, a lot of people lost their jobs in 2020, and they really went out and I love to see the people walking around the streets selling food and selling their nice little snacks or whatever it is, and they survived. So, but for me, it's just to think outside the box.
Well, back
so in other words, you can sell food and think outside the box. So that's the point I'm trying to make. You can be different.
Yes,
you can be different, and that is what makes entrepreneurship
because
so exciting.
Look how sushi blew up.
Yeah,
sushi, other Asian cuisines, they've been blowing up. They've been getting a lot more popular because that's outside of the normal St. Kitts food offerings.
And anyway, I mean, anyway you look at it, you are going to have more food people coming in. You are going to have more people selling clothes because you can't necessarily change. I shouldn't say you can't change. You can change what people desire. There are students right now at CFBC who are studying culinary arts. When they come out, they're either going to do one of three things: start a business selling food, work for somebody else who's already established in the food business, or migrate. right? And we're already suffering a lot through brain drain, not only in St. Kitts Nevis, but right across the region. People are just traveling because they're not getting the opportunities in their home country, so they're going elsewhere. But it's one of those three things that's going to happen. Now, if they decide to go on their own and start their own business, they're going to be entering a very crowded market. The question you have to ask is, how can I be different? What can I do differently to attract more customers? Because another thing that we're not looking at as well, we're just looking at just the resident population here in St. Kitts Nevis. But there's a growing, and it changes every year, student population. Two major universities here, and if you add the one in Nevis, that's 3, that they are, when on a Friday night or whenever, they are looking at places they can go to.
I don't even think it's just a Friday night, because I think
it's almost every night.
It's almost every night, because if you think about, and another great business that came out of the pandemic was 869 To Go.
Yep.
It really flourished,
and it is flourishing,
and it is continuing
to flourish,
because it just makes sense, especially if you're catering to people who have travel, if you're catering to overseas people who are accustomed to Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever other food delivery service that is out there. You introduce it here, it'll take off.
I'll give you an example. There's a person I know who has started a bakery. It actually started, I think, just before the pandemic. And of course, when the pandemic came, they ended up having to close the physical building they had where they were operating from. And they launched a website where you can order your pastries online.
Oh, yes.
How many bakeries in St. Kitts Nevis does that?
Love that. Add delivery to it, and you...
And add delivery. You pay a delivery fee, bam.
Again, people, you're
so it's thinking outside the box.
Right, no, but you see, these are all ideas that can stimulate the economy and aid people in slowly moving on. And that's why I think a lot of people bought into what the Prime Minister was saying, even though he got a lot of criticism for it. When he said during the elections campaign, it's better to give a man or a woman, well, not a man, but it's better to give a woman a sewing machine or give a man a weed eater for him to go work, right? That might just be what he wants, right? Rather than, him being dependent on the government, because a lot of people like to be independent, right? But again, a lot of people may just need that, right? Rather than, because you might just say, hey, give me a weed eater. I might decide, hey, yeah, I could go open a cleaning business, or a little grooming business. So instead of...
And it goes from just having a weed heater and cleaning yards to elevating to landscape and actually, learning how to take care of plants.
There are a lot of organizations now, like ECCB and these others, that reach out, send out, asking people to submit proposals and stuff like that to do maintenance work. So it's about thinking outside the box.
In fact, tourism just sent out one yesterday.
I saw that. I saw that press release as well. So that's my point. So it's we have this gap in the economy where people are not thinking outside the box to become their own entrepreneurs and get the people to actually come and work with them or for them. And I think if we think a little bit more and provide that assistance, I think you will see the number of people on these social programs decreasing, dwindling.
And that's why I say some of the funding that's available should be directed to developing business and entrepreneurship. I know a few years ago, the government had started that with, I think it was, you had the Fresh Start, then you also had partner programs you need to generate, to help and to guide and to mentor businesses and entrepreneurs, because there's need for that. And I think that's what the small business ministry is now trying to do is to have persons getting this assistance, but at the same time getting the kind of mentorship they need so their business will be successful. Because you need that, because the days of just getting a government job, or whether it be going on the step or whatever it is, and relying on that, is not sustainable, and it's not the best way.
Okay. So circling it back, because it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to break for the headline news, but circling it back to the original discussion, you mentioned that diverting some of those funds for the social assistance programs to the businesses is one way.
But it doesn't have to even be diverted. If the funds are available to keep the social programs and still fund those programs,
the business,
then you could do that.
So at least some collaboration in that regard, where it's not just social assistance and entrepreneurship. And German, you were raising, the graduation aspect of the social assistance programs. We need to push the graduation from depending on the government to depending on yourself. what else can be done as it relates to these social assistance programs? Do you think that can make them work more efficiently?
Well, Kevin, I know you have to break for the midday, so but this is a discussion that can go on and on and on and on, because I think for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, you have to sit down. The government needs to sit down with the private sector, sit down with civil society organizations to come up with the best solution to this, because I would say it's a problem, right? I could outline a few other options, but at this point in time, I'll just give you one. Why not, or two, why not provide that same assistance as the Prime Minister outlined, as I mentioned a little while ago, provide the assistance to people to, if for example, you're good in baking, I'll give you an oven. I give you money to start a business. Or you are not fully qualified in terms of academically. Let us establish an afternoon program where German can come, spend maybe 2 or 3 days a week in this program, do math, do English, do science, do business, do chemistry, and have the kid and have these people establish themselves academically. So now we're saying, okay, instead of Mr. Abel not being competently qualified to enter these programs, to enter the world of work, then he has 5 subjects. He can enter the work as an office assistant, or he's now starting from the bottom to come up, rather than having people just sit there. And even if we can say, hey, we're offering scholarships to people to go up AVEC and learn a trade, then now you can graduate yourself from there. Because I think, and this is one of the ideas that I threw out there some time back. If German is on the social program, send him up to AVEC. He becomes qualified, and then he can move. Make it mandatory that if you're going to be on these programs, you have to do one or the other or one of these skills training programs to move forward, so you can graduate rather than sitting there. So if you're going to say, hey, if Andres said he likes carpentry, okay, we're going to send you up to AVEC to learn carpentry, be certified in carpentry, or do mechanical work. So when you graduate now, we're expecting that within a year or 2, you can elevate yourself to the point that you're not going to be dependent on these social programs.
Nice. I was actually thinking, as you were talking, one of the things that I definitely want to see done better is the regulations, who's regulating these programs, and a regular account for the statistics of these programs. How much is it costing the government? How many people are on the program? How many people came on? How many people came off? That is what I would like to see. Additionally, another thing that I think would incentivize graduating is maybe for those people who do manage to become entrepreneurs, you incentivize it by making a grant system. So they have grant funding, they don't have to pay it back, but it's a grant lump sum, and they have to show these deliverables at the end of a specific period to then continue getting grant funding. And it's supposed to show growth. Let's say the grant funding is for a year and they receive grant funding every quarter once they meet their deliverables. I think that's another way.
And within a certain amount of time, you have to be able to hire a certain amount of people who are coming off these programs.
Another thing you should consider, guys, I know you have to break for the news, is, and the question you should ask is there an interest to have persons graduate from the program? Because if there's no interest, because, I mean, these programs have been going on for quite some time and have actually grown, as Mr. Esteban pointed out in his commentary. So if there is no particular interest for persons necessary to graduate from the program on the part of the authorities, then we're probably just wasting our time.
Right. Well, I think we'll wrap up this first session here, and we'll be right back. We'll continue the conversation after our headline news. We're going to be talking about the Freedom of Information legislation, anti-corruption bill, and the integrity in public life with Andre Huey and German Abel of the Media Association of St. Kitts and Nevis. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and the ICDF Taiwan Technical Mission.
You have the keys to your new car this Christmas? Now it's time to get it insured. Visit Dedeal Baldwin, agents for Caribbean Alliance Insurance, to save up to 65% off your motor insurance premium. All new clients are eligible for major discounts. Plus, there's lots of sweet prizes to be won. Switch and save and get in on the action. Visit us today in St. Kitts or Nevis, or give us a call at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Promotion ends December 31st and all quotes are valid until January 31st. Drive secure this Christmas with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Terms and conditions apply.
With over a century of perfection behind the Mackeson name, a smooth blend with perfect balance and richness, it's no wonder Mackeson Triple Stout has a legacy of perfection. Enjoy the world over. Introducing our new look with the same great taste. Mackeson. All hail the king.
Please drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
Think before you bin it. There can be some use in it. The Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority, in collaboration with Taiwan ICDF Technical Mission and the Department of Environment, presents Let's Recycle. We're encouraging all residential homes, commercial businesses, and schools to bring along your plastic bottles, metal cans, and aluminum cans ready for an opportunity to win big. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the following locations. In Nevis, every second and fourth Friday of each month at Delta Petroleum, ex-Petrol in Camps, Big Six in Gingerland, and the Old Artisan Village in Charlestown. In St. Kitts, every second and fourth Tuesday at the Connery Roundabout, every first and third Tuesday at Buckley's parking lot in front of Best Buy, and the last Saturday of each month in Dieppe Bay. But wait, that's not all. 1 pound equals 1 point. So bring your recyclables and build up your points for a chance to win stainless steel thermal bottles, flatware, and much more. To learn more about the recycling project, do visit our Facebook page at Let's Recycle in St. Kitts and Nevis, or contact us at 465-2372. The choice is yours. Save it or waste it. You are the difference. So think smart. Take PAT, reduce, reuse, recycle.
With the WIN headline news, I am Kevon Brown. Making the headlines, St. Kitts and Nevis negotiate support from Commonwealth counterparts to develop essential criminal justice systems and laws. Dominicans get ready to vote on December 6th, even amidst some opposition calls for protests and civil disobedience. Internationally, the G7 group and its allies have officially approved a cap on the price of Russian oil. In entertainment, actor Will Smith has returned to cinemas in the U.S. in his first major film role since his infamous slapping of Chris Rock at the Oscars. Now, the details. The Attorney General of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honourable Garth Wilkin, joined law ministers and senior legal officers from other Commonwealth Caribbean territories and Commonwealth nations in Africa, Asia, the Americas, Europe, and the Pacific for a Commonwealth Law Ministers meeting under the theme Strengthening International Cooperation Through the Rule of Law and the Protection of Human Rights. The biannual Commonwealth Law Ministers meeting was hosted in Balaclava in the Republic of Mauritius on November 22nd through 25th. The Attorney General said he was privileged to discuss measures relating to law and justice with other law ministers.
I had lots of conversations with the minister from Tanzania, the minister from Rwanda, even ministers from our own Commonwealth Caribbean territories like Belize and St. Vincent and the Grenadines about our shared issues. And we were able to discuss potential laws and potential ways we can work with our partners in the Commonwealth to find those solutions.
Wilkin confirmed that whilst in dialogue with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Rwanda, they discussed various legal systems that can be adapted to serve the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, particularly innovative legal aid and criminal investigation systems. Wilkin also confirmed negotiations for technical support for the Federation's Criminal Justice Reform Project from the Director of the Criminal Justice Unit of the Ministry of Legal Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. Given the rise in international cybercrime activities, Wilkin said a national computer emergency response structure needs to be implemented in St. Kitts and Nevis. He said through the gaining of best practice policies and model law from the Commonwealth Law Ministers meeting, he will seek to have such a structure implemented in the Federation. The Attorney General explained the importance of small island developing states receiving input from international jurisdictions on matters relating to law and justice.
For a small island developing state like ours, with a population of up to 60,000 people, it's important for us to participate in these sorts of meetings so we can share ideas and get knowledge from the jurisdictions that are much larger than ours, so we can set our policies based on Commonwealth standards, and we can look at laws that other jurisdictions have and see if we could copy those laws or adjust them to fit our circumstances. When you're a small island like ours, you need to get that input from the international community, and a meeting like this is the perfect opportunity to have that discussion with your colleagues from throughout the Commonwealth.
The various topics discussed at the Commonwealth Law Ministers meeting included, but were not limited to, people-centered justice, the future of our courts, law, climate change and food security, Commonwealth anti-corruption benchmarks, cybersecurity for elections, a Commonwealth guide on best practice, and freedom of expression and the role of the media. Meanwhile, Wilkin in a social media post informed that the Federation had been elected by Commonwealth Law Ministers to represent the Caribbean and the Americas on the Commonwealth Law Ministers Action Group alongside 8 other nations: Jamaica, Tanzania, Namibia, Samoa, Malaysia, Malta, and Mauritius. He said, quote, "We should all be proud of this election, which allows our small nation to have a loud international voice in reviewing progress and advising the Commonwealth Secretariat on key rule of law and equal access to justice strategies throughout the Commonwealth's 56 member countries. It is important for your government to take up space in the international arena and uphold the rule of law whilst we navigate the advancement of our proud nation in this globalized world," end quote. In regional news, Dominicans get ready to vote on December 6th, even amidst some opposition calls for protests and civil disobedience. Primetime Caribbean has that story.
Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has expressed confidence that there will be a smooth poll there on Tuesday. even amidst some opposition calls for protest and civil disobedience. The calls by the boycotting opposition have yet to receive any traction, and an earlier call for a national strike never materialized. The United Workers' Party has now announced that it will hold what it called a solidarity rally on Sunday. But a former UWP leader and a one-time opposition MP, Joshua Francis, said he does not think any of the maneuvers of his former party will have an impact.
Well, I don't think that none of the activities that has been announced by the United Workers' Party is going to stop the general election. As we know, and it's universally known, the Prime Minister of Dominica would have acted within the legal framework to announce his election. The Constitution of Dominica, which is the supreme law of the land, like other Commonwealth Caribbean countries, has given the Prime Minister the power to call an election whenever he wants. In that situation, he saw a headless political party, the main opposition party. He understood that the party was in disarray and very divisive, and he saw it as a strategic situation where he announced his election.
The incumbent Dominica Labour Party has accused the opposition of trying to insert violence into a campaign they are boycotting. The DLP cancelled a public meeting this week in the opposition stronghold of Salisbury following what it called credible threats of violence by some opposition activists. The DLP candidate for Salisbury, Lindsay Frank, accused the outgoing MP UWP's Hector John of also trying to intimidate her.
Hector John can come and drive in my yard again like he did today. But you are not going to intimidate me. That will not work.
Speaking at a public meeting in La Plaine Thursday night, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit said a proper poll will be held Tuesday.
The hour of decision is upon us as citizens and residents of this fair land. The world will be watching Dominica next Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. They will be looking to see how mature we are as a people. They will even be looking to see how civilized we are as a people.
Francis said he expects the poll to go ahead without any incident.
So December 6th is likely to happen unless we have a state of disruption that will cause a state of emergency that will cause the President of Dominica, Mr. Charles Savre, to call for a hold on the election. I don't see anything stopping it.
Prime Minister Skerrit noted that the snap elections some are protesting have been a feature in Western democracies.
My dear people, snap elections have been called all over the world. Snap elections have been efficiently conducted all over the world. And the will of the people was determined and honored. How is it, therefore, that nothing abnormal is happening in Dominica, yet the voters of Dominica are being made to live in fear?
Francis said while he believes there are legitimate concerns about the need for election reform, opposition unpreparedness to an early poll was obvious.
It is true that the opposition party was not ready, no doubt about it. The main opposition party, the United Workers' Party, would have had several challenges itself and would not have been ready for an election on December 6th.
Skerrit said the UWP is miscalculated.
No one in this country told the United Workers' Party not to contest the elections. They heard elections were called. They knew they were not ready, and they panicked. They jumped ahead of themselves and declared that they were not taking part. They refused to nominate candidates. And now, as a date for voting draweth nigh, they are feeling very stupid, ladies and gentlemen.
As far as Francis is concerned, there is no doubt the DLP will have a major victory.
Well, I expect the Prime Minister's party to win all seats. There are one or two promising independent candidates, but by virtue of the fact that the main opposition party has been calling its supporters not to go and vote, then that's a major dagger on the chances of success for the independent parties, the independent candidates. However, between now and the next general election, should the opposition party change or shifts its position on participation in the election, in that it may ask his supporters to go out to vote. If that were to happen, we would expect 1 or 2 independent candidates to be successful. Negative that possibility, I don't see any of the independent candidates being successful on December 6th.
Prime Minister Skerrit said Thursday night his party controlling all the seats will be a true reflection of the will of the people, given the circumstances and the reaction of the main opposition.
Do not blame voters for your stupidity, Workers' Party. You denied your supporters the opportunity to vote for you, and now you are trying to intimidate mine. Well, that is not going to happen in the Commonwealth of Dominica.
10 new candidates of the incumbent DLP are all expected to become first-time MPs, including Cuban-trained medical doctor Dr. Cassandra Williams, who said Friday in a promotional clip she's looking forward to representation.
This is a challenge that I take seriously, and this is my moment to give back to a community that has given me so much.
Williams is the DLP candidate for the Rural East seat in La Plaine, and on Thursday night, Prime Minister Skerrit hailed her candidacy.
I am proud of our choice of candidate. She shall represent you with honor and dignity, ladies and gentlemen.
At least 2 of the independent candidates have withdrawn from the race, but Tiana B. Hansen, the son of former Prime Minister Roosevelt Douglas, is still among a dozen in the race.
I make myself available. I make myself available to serve the people. That's what I'm here. If the people they do not wish me to serve them, I will wait.
B. Hansen said while he is being outspent in the campaign, he's confident his candidacy offers an alternative in St. Joseph.
Of course, this is our country. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to all of us. So, all of us fix it or we'll perish.
This is Primetime Caribbean. More news after this.
We now bring you these international reports.
Western allies have agreed to put a cap on the price of Russian oil. The G7 group of nations, as well as Australia and the European Union, have decided that no country should pay more than $60 a barrel, slightly below the current price of $64. The US says it will immediately cut into Putin's most important source of revenue and stop Moscow profiteering from its war of aggression against Ukraine. Louisa Pilbeam reports.
The latest Russian missile strike in Kharkiv. More destruction and suffering in a war that is showing no sign of ending. But a move by the G7, the world's 7 largest advanced economies, Australia and the European Union, to cap the price of Russian oil is hoped to bring an end to this war closer. They've agreed to restrict the price of Russian oil at $60 a barrel, hoping to wound Russia with another financial sanction.
This price cap has 3 objectives. First, it strengthens the effect of our sanction. Second, it will further diminish Russia's revenues. And thirdly, at the same time, it will stabilize global energy markets.
The limit will come in on Monday, after the EU persuaded Poland to back the plan after Warsaw initially considered it too high. And some market experts believe it's more of a symbol of rebellion against the Kremlin than a realistic financial weapon.
They want one measure in place to certainly contribute to that discount being bigger, but not as large as some wanted. And I think that the fact it's taken the EU so long to agree on a cap is because some countries, which tend to be more hawkish on Russia, wanted that cap to be much lower.
Other experts say sanctions like this are hurting Russia, but President Vladimir Putin is still making huge amounts of money through oil.
There are going to be a lot of different ways that people could skirt around this price cap. And obviously the Russians will do everything they can to make sure that that happens. Although $60 isn't a bad price at the moment, they could do other things. They could cut back on oil production so that prices go higher, but then that wouldn't be so good for countries like India, for instance, which has now become Russia's #1 purchaser of oil.
The Kremlin denounced the scheme, saying it would not supply those countries which enforced a price cap. Before the war, more than half of Russia's oil exports went to Europe, but Russia has found new markets in India and China, and new money to fund its war. Louisa Pilbeam, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Kiev now and our correspondent Jessica Parker, who is there for us. I suppose the big question then, Jessica, is will this have any impact on Russia?
Yeah, of course. And I think as we've just been hearing in that report, there are a lot of questions about exactly how this price cap is going to work and how effective it is going to be. And certainly in terms of reaction here in Kyiv, overnight from the President's office, President Zelensky's office, one of the things they're saying is it would be necessary to reduce to $30 per barrel in order to quickly destroy, as they put it, the enemy's economy. So I think a slightly lukewarm response there from the government in Kyiv in terms of how they see this cap. Of course, it's designed to limit Russian revenues in terms of its sale of oil in order to then limit its ability to finance its war in Ukraine. I think from Ukraine's perspective, they always want these Western allies to go further and faster. And it's taken, of course, a while to get here. The EU wrangling up until the last moment over which limits to set the cap at. And this rather familiar battle, actually, where you have countries like Poland, Baltic states as well, really wanting to go harder and faster to hit Russia's economy more strongly versus maybe a more cautious approach by some other countries further to the west. But I think it will be seen as a step forward. But as you say, all eyes will be on whether it really does that much to limit Russian revenues and limit Russia's ability to carry out this ongoing war, which continues to take lives and affect people's lives across the whole country.
Russia, in response, is saying that it's not going to supply those countries which try to stick to the cap. And there are differing levels, aren't there, of exposure on that front across Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way this cap is going to work, we're told, is that we'll basically stop shipping and insurance firms under kind of G7 control from selling Russian oil above this $60 cap. And what we're hearing from the likes of Washington is that they have a big dominance of this market in terms of the G7, and therefore they think it will be very effective. Russia making this statement overnight in terms of how it will react, you wouldn't expect them to be particularly pleased about any efforts to limit its oil revenues. Of course, it's all timed as well with this ban on seaborne oil into the European Union. Now, that was wrangled over for a long time as well, and there were certain exemptions for pipeline oil to some landlocked countries within the EU. And again, what you see, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, this issue of energy supplies is a really crucial one because large parts of the world have been heavily reliant on Russian fossil fuels for many, many years. And following the Russian invasion, there was suddenly this moment where lots of countries thought, Russia's making a lot of money out of things that we're buying from them. How do we tackle this? But there was a nervousness of just cutting supplies off, of course, because of the impact it would have on the global economy, which is why you sometimes see these compromise deals coming, whether it's on gas or whether it's on oil imports as well.
And just briefly, Jessica, just talk to us very briefly about the situation in Kyiv at the moment with the power outages, because that is the huge concern at the moment there, isn't it?
Yes, it is. As you can see, it's windy. It's pretty cold here as well. Temperature's going to keep dropping. We're hearing emergency power outages continuing in the capital today. They've been trying to stabilise the energy grid after attacks Wednesday before last on large parts of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Kyiv, it seems, particularly badly hit, but power outages continuing for businesses, for families as well. I've got to say, a lot of people you speak to very resilient about the whole thing, saying that they'll find ways around it, but it is going to be an extremely tough winter, and we don't know, of course, whether Russia will try and further destabilise and attack Ukraine's energy grid again. That has been the expectation. President Zelensky has said as much.
The Trump Organization reaped substantial benefits from a 15-year tax fraud scheme. That's what the prosecution said Friday in closing arguments at the trial of former U.S. President Donald Trump's real estate company. Joshua Steinglass from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office told jurors that the scheme helped Trump's company keep salaries down, avoid taxes, and keep executives happy. Prosecutors alleged the Trump Organization paid personal expenses for some executives without reporting the income and compensating them as if they were independent contractors. The Trump Organization has pleaded not guilty. Trump was not personally charged. In its defense, the company has said the government's chief witness, a Trump Organization executive, was a rogue executive acting for himself. The company's longtime chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, has pleaded guilty to tax fraud and testified for the prosecution. If convicted on all 9 counts it faces, Trump's company could face up to $1.6 million in fines. Jury deliberations are expected to begin Monday. Trump has called the charges politically motivated. The case is separate from New York Attorney General Letitia James' $250 million civil lawsuit accusing Trump, 3 of his adult children, and his company of overstating asset values and Trump's net worth to get favorable bank loans and insurance coverage.
The American movie star Will Smith returns to cinemas in the US today in his first major film role since his infamous snapping of Chris Rock at the Oscars after the comedian made a joke about Smith's wife. It was a moment that shocked millions around the world. So, can he make a comeback? The BBC's Tom Brooke has sent this report from New York.
In recent days, Will Smith has been on the red carpet on a charm offensive promoting Emancipation, an historical drama which tells of an escaped slave in 1860s America who, after a terrifying ordeal, gains freedom. After being in industry purgatory for the last few months, Smith is most definitely back in the spotlight. Reporters asked him how he felt.
So far, so good.
Will Smith was for years one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. The big question is, will his fans come out to see his new film? Many were perplexed and disappointed by his Oscars night slap. Will they be staying away as Emancipation opens up in cinemas?
What he did to Chris Rock for no reason was crazy. He's a good actor and he's a legend, but after what he did,
The Academy has banned Smith from attending the Oscars for 10 years, but his new film could conceivably still bring him an acting nomination. Critics have been praising his performance.
It's quite a unique set of circumstances in Oscar history that Will Smith is facing here. In a hypothetical situation where he stayed in his seat after Chris Rock made a joke about his wife, I think that Will Smith would have a real shot at getting nominated for an Oscar here. In light of everything that's happened, it's an uphill battle, but it's not an insurmountable one.
I will not be afraid.
Will Smith's film is inspired by a real man from the 1860s, Peter, who'd been so badly beaten by his slave masters that a photograph of his scarred back helped fuel opposition to slavery. Despite his Oscar night slap, Will Smith hopes his new film's message about the evils of racism gets through.
I wanted to create something that was, just a reminder of the tragic ends that can come from that type of hate and brutality against one another.
You were listening to the WinFM Headline News on 98.9. Our top stories were: St. Kitts and Nevis negotiate support from Commonwealth counterparts to develop essential criminal justice systems and laws. Dominicans get ready to vote on December 6th, even amidst some opposition calls for protests and civil disobedience. Internationally, the G7 group and its allies have officially approved a cap on the price of Russian oil. In entertainment, actor Will Smith has returned to cinemas in the U.S. in his first major film role since his infamous slapping of Chris Rock at the Oscars. Thank you for listening.
That was the WinFM Headline News. The Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and the ICDF Taiwan Technical Mission.
Think before you bin it. There can be some use in it. The St. Kitts and Nevis Solid Waste Management, in collaboration with Taiwan ICDF Technical Mission and the Department of Environment, presents Let's Recycle. We are encouraging all residential homes, commercial businesses, and schools to bring along your plastic bottles, metal cans, and aluminum cans, ready for an opportunity to win big. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every second and fourth Tuesday each month at the following locations in St. Kitts: the Connery Roundabout, every first and third Tuesday at Buckley's parking lot in front of Best Buy, and the last Saturday of each month in Dieppe Bay. In Nevis, every second and fourth Friday of each month at Delta Petroleum, Ex-Petrol in Camps, Big Six in Gingerland, and Old Artisan Village in Charlestown. But wait, that's not all. £1 equals 1 point. So bring your recyclables and build up your points for a chance to win stainless steel thermal bottle, flatware set, and much more. To learn more about the recycling project, do visit our Facebook page at Let's Recycle in St. Kitts and Nevis, or contact us at 465-2372. The choice is yours. Save it or waste it. You are the difference. Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Merry Christmas. 'Tis the season to save with Delayed Woman and Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Purchasing a new car this Christmas? Save up to 65% off. Yes, that's 65% off your motor insurance premiums. Switch and save.
Found the sound 98.9 FFM.
People make the world go
Hello?
Jean, you know every time I call you, it's always about something good.
What going on?
Well, the TDC retail stores in St. Kitts and Nevis are at it again. Their new stocks have arrived.
Really?
Yes, new furniture, printers, toys, appliances, electronics, housewares, even decorations, and so much more. New is in.
So, girl Betty, when we going?
You know me, I don't miss a beat when it comes to TDC. I'm getting ready to go to TDC Automotive and the Home and Building Depot now. And next week, we're definitely going over to CDS Nevis to see what they have over there too.
Betty, me am here. Betty, you gone?
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects or sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
And welcome back to Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. I'm your host, Kevon Brown. I'm joined with Andre Huey and Jermaine Abel of the Media Association of St. Kitts and Nevis. Earlier we were having a bit of a discussion on the last commentary that was shared by Dwyer Astafan concerning social assistance programs. And it sort of brought up a few concerns as it relates to corruption and, taking advantage of the already in existing social programs. And I think that kind of tied in a little bit to the larger discussion that we wanted to have about the Freedom of Information legislation. And since I have the man himself, Mr. Andre Huey, here, maybe he can give me a little bit of an update on the conversations that have been had with the government. I know you've had conversations previously with past Attorney General Vincent Byron, and as well with the Honorable Garth Wilkin. So how has the conversation been? Any movement forward?
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Well, yes, the last time we were here, we spoke a bit about our intentions to meet with the government on the Freedom of Information, which for most people, I don't know if people are aware, but the law has actually been passed. It was passed, I think in 2018. But it hasn't been enacted because, of course, there are certain amendments that need to be made to the legislation. So we had met with the previous Attorney General prior to just before the elections, and expressed some of our concerns and gotten the commitment that, the amendments are being made and some of what we would have brought on would have been looked at. Of course, the government changed, and so we intended to meet with the current AG, which we did. And I must say, I wasn't in that meeting because wasn't able to make it that day, but my executives, my most, namely the first Vice President, Mr. Glenn Bart, who is actually spearheading that project, and Jamila McPhail, the Communications Director, they both met with the AG, and from what I've been told, the meeting went very well, and in fact the Attorney General was quite receptive to most of the recommendations that we suggested. I must say also a big thank you to the Media Institute of the Caribbean, because they assisted us in reviewing the legislation that is already passed, our current legislation. We had a meeting, prior to meeting with the AG, we met with Mrs. Dion Jackson Miller, who's a journalist and attorney in Jamaica, and she's also a board member of MIC. And she was very instrumental in pointing out some of the things that we should be looking at. She had a chance to look through the legislation. She's actually an expert on access to information, which is what it's called in Jamaica. Because in fact, I think she's actually doing a thesis on it right now for her doctorate. So she's, quite affair with the some of the similarities and differences in legislations across the Caribbean, and some of the things the deficiencies that she sees in the Jamaica legislation, which she was able to point out, because some of our provisions were similar to those in Jamaica. So she was able to point out certain things that we needed to pay attention to, and those were very instrumental for us in our meeting with the AG. And like I said, from the report I've gotten, the meeting went very well, and the Attorney General, in principle, agreed to include most of the recommendations that we made. There were one or two that he still had reservations about, and he wanted to, insist on what was already in the legislation. But I could speak to some of the things that we did recommend. For example, in our current law, there is, and we actually discussed this in our last general meeting for the Media Association just this past week. We're looking at time limits. The law doesn't, as it stands right now, provide for time limits for how long it should take for you to get information. So if you go to request information, how long should it take for you to get that information? There's no specific time limit in the legislation at the moment. We were advised that we should insist on getting a time limit because, you could make a request. You might think it's a simple request. You should get a response in a reasonable time. And, it could go on for days, weeks, months, and you're not getting the information. That was one of the things I think we sort of maybe where the meeting with the AG was concerned, probably had a difference of opinion on that, because I think the AG was more along the lines, from what I've been informed, along the lines of being, there's probably no need to have that in it because, there should not be a reason for an exorbitant amount of time taken for information to get back to you. However, as I made the point in the meeting with our members on Wednesday, we believe we should have a time limit, and we will insist that we, at least that be considered, because we also understand that, some of the persons who may, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anyone, but we do know that sometimes one of the tactics that can be used in delaying information or even inhibiting the work of media workers is not giving you information or delaying it or dragging it out, so to speak. And so if you drag it out, you feel like, well, you can't report on it because you don't have the information to report on it. So we believe that there should be a time limit in the legislation.
An example on that, Kevin, our colleagues in Trinidad actually complained about that because I think the time frame that the Freedom of Information, I believe it had, was about 60 to 90 days.
In Trinidad, the one in Trinidad.
Yeah, if I can remember correctly. The problem with that is, if Kevin sends in a request for information, I don't have to respond to Kevin until the 90th day. And then when I respond to Kevin, I say, hey, Kevin, I acknowledge your letter. I'm now going to get around to deal with it.
And that buys them another 60 to 90 days.
Exactly. Wow. Right. So by the time then, Kevin is frustrated and said, listen, this story is going in the bin. So you already, for a simple story. So that is why we're saying it would be nice for us to have a very strict time limit, because people are trustworthy, but then there's some people who can drag their feet on getting you that information. So that's why we're like, give us some, we'd love to see a time frame within there.
And what was recommended to us, and I wasn't aware of this until we had the meeting with Mrs. Jackson Miller, that there is a treaty known as the Escazú Treaty, which St. Kitts and Nevis is a signatory to. And one of the provisions of that treaty is for access to information. That's one of the things that's is part of the whole democratization of a society, and of course being a signatory to that treaty. And in the Escazú Treaty, they actually recommend, we are recommending 14 days with an extension of 10 days, and the Escazú Treaty actually recommends recommends that a 10-day extension be granted in the in a case where more time is needed. So
in the first, the time limit is to get a response to your
get a response to the question. So in other words, we made the request, and then they of course would respond to say, okay, we've acknowledged your request, etc. And the relevant department is searching for the information. So it shouldn't go beyond, in our estimation at least, a 14-day period. And then, of course, if you need more time in terms of getting the answer, then you can indicate, okay, we need some more time, we're going to utilize the extension then that's afforded to us in the law. But there is no such time limit at all in the legislation. So essentially, you could have, and while, while I believe the AG might be well-meaning in terms of thinking, well, it shouldn't take a long time for us to get information. Again, just even using the example that Jermaine drawn from Trinidad, the information could be delayed indefinitely. And that can inhibit your work as a journalist if you're trying to get information, or if you're a member of the public just trying to get information on certain matters.
Right, because it's not just journalists.
It's not just journalists.
Students want the information too, you know. And if we want our students to be able to.
Let me give you that example, Kevin, which I think why freedom of information legislation, an updated legislation is needed. I was doing a regional project. In me and Andre, we did some regional investigative work.
I think I was a part of that. The CBI.
But
right.
I did the CBI. I did another one. And this was a very lengthy project, and I call a specific ministry to request some information. Kevin, this is not the sort of information that will bring down a government.
It's basic.
This is basic information. Right. This is information that I can Google online, but you want the full information. Right. So I picked up the phone. I sent an email to, I'm not going to call any names, but a representative in the specific ministry. And I didn't get a response to say that the email was acknowledged. So I called the person like a week after. The response I got, just following up on my email to get a sense of what exactly, when can I get a response. And the person asked me, why do I need this information? Why does the public need to know this information? And if I think this is relevant information that the public needs. And this is not information, again, that is going to bring down a government. This is simple information that is available on international agencies, websites, and sort of thing. So, but to get all of what is needed, to compile it together, which would make it more easier for us, right? Rather than me going here, there, and everywhere to get it. I could just reach out to you, you provide me the information, and we can flow smoothly. So those are some of the issues that, and up to now, I resent the email stating everything that they asked me to update. And as we speak right now, I've not received an acknowledgement to that email to say that it was received, nor did I get any information on that.
Except to ask why you're requesting the
information.
Oh,
no. That's when we spoke over the phone.
The phone.
But not an acknowledgement
okay.
that they received the follow-up email. So those are some of the challenges, and that's why putting a time frame for us would be really good in terms of freedom of information.
And of course, with the freedom of information, Mr. Abel would not or should not have to go through a situation like that, because then the law would require that civil servant to provide the information.
The question would not even be asked.
The question
why
shouldn't
is this
even
relevant?
Exactly. So that is why freedom of information is important. Another thing that we actually looked at in one of our recommendations, excuse me, is Section 9, number 4 of the legislation, which talks about requests for information. By the way, before I get to that, let me just explain what the Escazú Agreement is. The Escazú Agreement is a regional agreement for Latin America and the Caribbean for environmental access rights. It grants access to justice, environment information, and other things. St. Kitts and Nevis signed and ratified the agreement September 2019 and have to implement or modify the law or its law to comply with obligation of the agreement. So anywhere in its laws that is not in conjunction with this agreement, then there has to be modifications, which is again why a time limit, which is also recommended by the Escazú Agreement, is, I think, in our opinion, very important. So on the issue of access, request for information, Section 9 of the legislation, in number 4 it says, a request for information pursuant to Section 5(2) must identify the right the person making the request is seeking to exercise or protect, and the reasons why the information is required to exercise or protect that right. So in other words, someone who's requesting that information has to give a reason why they're requesting that information. What right do they have to request that information? We have been recommended that section is totally unacceptable. Because essentially what you're saying is that you're putting a specific provision in there that is essentially forcing persons who have the right to the information already just by requesting the information, and it's public information. What right do you have to ask for that information? Almost similar to what German was told. And so we this is one of the things that we actually discussed, and we would have brought forward that in fact, the intention of freedom of information removes that prerequisite or that restriction for us to get information. So we should not have to give a reason why we should get that information. And again, it goes back to ESCAZO, which gives you the right to access to, among other things, information. So those are some of the things, for example, that we looked at, and several others. I probably won't have the time to go through all of them, but there were several other things that we had identified as well that we discussed. And like I said, some were agreed to by the Attorney General, and some he insisted on keeping within the legislation itself.
Right, and I think right now it's just a waiting game to see when because it is a waiting game, when the amendments will be made, how many of them will actually make it into Parliament, and when they'll be passed, because I think we're still waiting for the anti-corruption to make it into...
Right.
Well, put it this way. I don't want to say that the last AG was not moving. He was. Mm-hmm. But the current AG has it out there for feedback. And it seems as though sometime, and we're hoping, sometime within the first quarter of next year, that this legislation, the amendments can be made to the legislation so the Freedom of Information can be enacted in St. Kitts and Nevis. I know, like Andre said, we had discussions with the last AG, but we know what happened, right?
Yes.
You know, it's out there.
Yes.
Right, so a lot of what we discussed could not have come to fruition, but now we have the current AG, and we met with him, and he accepted, and he was welcoming with the discussions with the association, and now that the FOI is out there, and other legislation are out there for feedback. So hopefully.
We should be receiving actually once the amendments are placed, we should be receiving a copy of it as well for the Media Association to look at and to vet and make recommendations or adjustments if needed. The same was done also for the Anti-Corruption Act. We were also received a copy from the AG to look at. I personally had also went through it and made some recommendations and asked some questions as pertain to certain things in it. We've also extended it to the wider membership of the Media Association to look at as well and to get feedback from them. The anti-corruption and also the amendments to the integrity in public life.
Right. Yes.
So we are anticipating and looking forward to the amendments for the freedom of information, and then we go from there.
All right. We'll take a quick break and then we'll be back with Inside News. We'll jump into a little bit of discussion on how these three bills, because I think there's been a lot of emphasis on these three bills and how they'll help with transparency and corruption and all of that aim of that buzzword, that lovely political buzzword that they love, good governance. But we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back here on Inside the News on Win FM.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
TDC Financial Services. We're here for you to help you make your dreams come true. Whether your needs are big or small, we'll support you with them all. TDC Financial Services. We are strong. TDC Financial Services. This is where you belong.
TDC Financial Services, where money is made easy.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
We're back with Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9, joined by the Media Association of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Andre Huey and Jermaine Abel. Huey, you mentioned that you had a chance to go through both the drafts, the anti-corruption and the integrity. What were some of the issues that you
I wanted to find out, and actually I meant to ask the AG that question and I forgot. But I noticed there were terms that were switched around, and I don't know if it's semantics or if there's an actual real meaning behind it. Public official and a person in public life. Those were I think the older legislation or the older version would have had public official, and it was interchanged with person in public. I would have to look at it again to get the exact terminology. But that was one of the things I meant to ask him about, and I actually forgot. But in terms of one of the things that I looked at with the anti-corruption was to really find out, and it in the anti-corruption bill it did talk about the special prosecutor that would be assigned, who's somebody who's an attorney, who would be assigned, and there's certain stipulations and regulations, restrictions that they have in terms of what they can be involved in and can't be involved in, which I thought that was good, because then you're trying to show up independence of that person, because that person obviously is playing a very important role. In some of the notes that I took, I wanted to find out if public officers listed in the amendments in the anti-corruption, if all these persons are required to file, the integrity in public life, if all of them are required to file with the Integrity Commission, because it didn't come that clear to me. I was told it would only be the members of parliaments to assistant secretaries. So no, not every public servant would have to file declarations. Declarations are private as well. So even though they are filing to the commission, and that meaning the MPs and the assistant secretaries, we the public will not have access to that information because that is private.
It's supposed to be confidential.
It's confidential information. I know, for example, but I do believe though that certain public officials, some of those declarations, at least some certain aspects of those declarations, I believe should be public. Not for all. I don't think all MPs, you necessarily have to have it for all MPs. But you could put a case where the Prime Minister or the Leader of Opposition and maybe someone else. In Jamaica, the Prime Minister's assets are made public. He has to file at a certain time. If he doesn't file at a certain time, he can be reprimanded by the Commission. There was a case, in fact, when the Prime Minister of Jamaica filed his declarations late, and he was reprimanded by the Commission in Jamaica for that. But journalists basically, or anybody basically, can request that information. That's actually public information. So we know how much assets, or we should know how much assets, in this case in Jamaica, the Prime Minister of Jamaica has, and the Leader of Opposition. So that way, because there was also a time too, if I were to look back in the situation in Jamaica, where the current Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, before he ascended to the office, or before he was elected, there was a big talk, a song and dance about a house he was building in a particular area, and they were like, well, how does he afford to, and he had to literally in Parliament declare his assets and explained how he was able, along with his wife, who was an investor, I think she's I don't remember, I don't want to say it because I don't remember right now, but she was actively involved in helping to raise the money through investments and everything to build that house. But he had to explain to Parliament, at a committee in Parliament, how did he come to have the money, to earn the money, because he doesn't earn that money as a parliamentarian, to build this house. What came out, some revelations came out in that discovery as well that raised some concerns on some people, because it turned out that he did it for an offshore company. And so people were asking, well, why did you have to use an offshore company to do this construction and all that? So he had to answer a lot of questions, basically. So as a public official, especially going for a high office, the public at least should have an idea that what you earn is what you use to, and how you earn it is what you use to, do the things that you do. And so in the case of Jamaica, through the Integrity in Public Life, filings, declarations, the opposition leader and the Prime Minister's declarations are made public. The other ministers and other MPs, that's usually private.
But not for me though. No. I think this is where the issue really comes. Because is it okay to say certain public officials, but then you ignore certain public officials? Because, for example, if Mr. Abel lives in a one-bedroom house that he owns, when he entered Parliament after winning his seat in Constituency 8, but then he's the Minister of Public Infrastructure, and then 2 years into office, Mr. Abel, who's just an ordinary journalist, moved from just living in a one-bedroom house to building a monstrosity of a mansion.
With security.
With security. Right? Now, Kevin or Andre, as reporters, want to investigate what's really going on here. Because if Mr. Abel, all the time they're walking, catching a bus, paying $250, living in a one-bedroom house, and within 2 years, Mr. Abel win the lottery. He knock nothing at none of the casinos.
He didn't discover oil.
But then all of a sudden, Mr. Abel was able to build a mansion. And Mr. Abel's wife now, she's selling fish in the supermarket or on the Bay Road. So the question is, would reporters be able to have access to certain information? Right. I understand the nature of the environment that we're living in and we're operating in. Right. That it's heavily politicized. That certain things you may not want certain people in the public to be able to access. Right.
How many officials? Are we talking about elected officials then? So we're saying only elected officials?
I'm not. But you see, this is where the gray area comes. Because reporters themselves, if we operate by the journalism ethics, would mean that Mr. Abel can just come to go and dig into Andre's past for no particular reason. Right. So that's what I'm saying. So it's a gray area in terms of who we should be able to ask to think.
Well, I think, I don't know what the thinking was in Jamaica for that, only those two persons, the opposition leader and the Prime Minister, but I'm thinking, well, one is aspiring to be the Prime Minister, the other one is the Prime Minister, is the leader of the country. So it is only fair that in that context, that the leader, the person who has the most responsibility, should be in a position where certain aspects of his declarations are made public.
I would say...
And it's only based on, I'm just finding some information here, based on the Integrity Act 42, Section 3B, they're only required what is made public is the annual summary of statutory declarations by the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition. So it's not all their assets.
We'll take a call because apparently the conversation has... sorry, caller. Feel free to call back in.
If you ask me, I would say elected representatives because
I don't think it's an unreasonable request.
Yeah,
I don't think it's an unreasonable
because I would want to know what my representative doing, and this again is another addition that should be made. If you're an elected parliamentarian, whether you sit on the government side or the opposition side, we know a lot of people have businesses, right? Do you still allow them to keep their businesses? Do they have to divest? How is all of this going to fit into it?
Stick a pin in. We'll take this call. Good afternoon, caller. Good afternoon, caller.
Good day.
Good day.
Yes, good day, gentlemen. It's good to hear that the press, I guess as an association, as opposed to individuals, responded to the request for input into the Integrity in Public Life Amendment, the proposed amendment, as well as the anti-corruption legislation, right? I myself, as a private citizen, actually made a submission as well, okay? Because I saw some difficulties in the legislation in terms of, well, first of all, the appointment of a special prosecutor. Really and truly, that would not have been necessary if we had confidence in the office itself and the individuals running the office of the DPP, if we had confidence that they would be totally fair, totally impartial, incorruptible, and those things. Okay? Because what we don't want is another layer of bureaucracy on top of the existing ones that's going to cost the country money. Right? And so I thought the approach really should have been that we should try and make the existing offices and entities that are concerned with these things, try to make them work. And the entities that I'm talking about are things like the Integrity in Public Life Commission, the Public Accounts Committee, the Freedom of Information Commissioner, or Commission, those sorts of things, okay? Because really and truly, if they were working, this whole thing would not have been necessary. To make a whole new special prosecutor specifically to guard against this is essentially, I think, making things a bit redundant. And there's nothing wrong in built-in redundancy because supposedly then you have some action in terms of investigations and so on. But why I didn't understand why it wasn't possible to, for instance, extend the powers of those entities, director of audit, those entities that certainly can do the kinds of investigations that are required, and then they can decide whether a special prosecutor is necessary, right? Because certainly, I don't think a special prosecutor should be appointed from local entities.
Well, the special prosecutor wouldn't be appointed locally. I think from what was said, the special prosecutor would be appointed from the Caribbean Court of Justice?
And Legal Services Unit.
I have to double check. I don't recall, but I have the legislation, so I'll look for it.
But it's not. Right. It's not because locally appointed.
Thing is, I get the impression that a lot of these things are not. Because, for instance, I think in the appointment of some judiciary offices, it is on the it's done by the Judicial and Legal Complex, the OACS unit, but there's in consultation with or on the advice of those kinds of things of whether the local public service commission. So you see where there is possibility for contamination, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, it says the Judicial and Legal Services Commission may, in consultation with the Attorney General, appoint an attorney at law as the special prosecutor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? And so what I'm saying is, what I'm advocating is for it to be totally separated from the local intervention. So once the entities that are concerned with anti-corruption and malfeasance and those kinds of things, maladministration, those things, once they decide that a particular case warrants the intervention of a special prosecutor, they contact the the OECS unit directly, and they decide on the appointment of that special prosecutor, and it should not be someone from this jurisdiction. It should be someone from outside the jurisdiction. Otherwise, you run the risk of contaminating the whole process. I also feel that, I think I saw in the legislation when I read it, that the special prosecutor is going to have staff, etc., etc. That's more money, right? Which I don't think is necessary. Like I said, the other entities, once given the power to investigate, can have a staff that does those kinds of things. Right? I certainly feel that the special prosecutor should not be an open-ended permanent office, right? It should be there, appointed for a specific time, so as not to draw out these investigations and prosecution and those things. Whenever there is need for a case to be heard, I think it should be given priority on the running assizes for the next assizes whenever they occur, right? Those are things that are going to make a difference, because what has seemed to have happened in the past is that these things are drawn out for inordinate lengths of time. Mm-hmm. And by the time you're ready to really do anything about it, I mean, so many years have passed, and things are still. And whatever use was happening may have been continuing in the interim, right? You don't, for instance, want to have a case where the Public Accounts Committee is investigating something that occurred a year ago. You know how many things can happen in a year, right? These are things that require swift action, and that is what I think is needed in this particular case. To see things, the public got to see things working, see these things working, and not just the public, the officials, the public officials themselves. Because if you can bet your life, if there are loopholes that exist, people are going to find them.
All right, thank you, caller.
And if they don't, if there are no consequences, and there should be consequences across the board, right, for people when they don't apply whatever eventual law there is or systems there are against anti-corruption.
Thank you, caller.
Okay, then.
Yeah, very good point. I will, however, say that while I can partially agree with the caller in terms of not having having to create another position for this, I understand the thinking behind it, because one, I think the DPP is overworked. The office is overworked. I mean, there's a reason why they have a high turnover of Crown Counsels almost on a yearly basis, because they have a lot of cases to deal with, and I think corruption cases or matters of corruption that's brought to their attention may not get the necessary attention it deserves. So having a special prosecutor, I think the AG, and I don't want to think for the AG, I think he thinks for himself, the thinking behind having a special prosecutor is to have corruption cases dealt with and given priority. Because, again, you don't want to put something on the desk of the DPP with all good intentions he or she may have, and it leaves there because there are other pressing criminal matters to tend to. So, yes, it will cost the country some more money, but if it means it is helping to uproot corruption at the highest order,
I think it will save.
I think it will save money in the long run.
Yeah.
So I'm all for the special prosecutor, because you want these cases not to be swept under the rug. You want them to be dealt with alacrity and speed.
Yeah, but I don't also believe that the special counsel position is a full-time position. In terms of the legislation is passed today, we recognize Andre. All parties agree on Andre to be the special counsel. I don't believe that the special prosecutor is going to be somebody who's going to be sitting within the anti-corruption unit every day waiting for cases to prosecute.
Essentially on retainer.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, we have a specific case, all parties come together, John Doe is going to be the special prosecutor for this particular case. He or she is going to spearhead a team to investigate this case. And whatever findings we come up with, we bring it to the court. So I'm suspecting that that's how it's going to be. I'm not sure, but
that's something we could ask to
yeah,
I kind of get the impression that the special prosecutor is actually a full-time position. I thought so too when I started reading the legislation, but as I got further down, it appeared to me that this is a full-time position. Because this is something that the person, because if you look at it, let me see if I could find that section, it actually limits what the person can do professionally while they're serving as a special prosecutor.
Oh.
So I say that's a thing.
So let me find that part. But I thought it was like a part-time thing, but it appears as if
it's
as
a
I
full-time.
going through it that they may be serving on a full-time
yeah,
basis.
but then they're saying a special prosecutor. Right, and for me, a special prosecutor is
because it is. Look at the functions, for example. The functions of special prosecutor are to receive complaints from any person of corrupt conduct and investigate such corrupt conduct. You can't be a private attorney and investigating. Or where are you going to get time to do that? That alone says it's a full-time position. Because this person has to put a lot of attention on cases that come to his or her table as a matter of investigation. They are also to receive complaints from any person of conduct related to offences created from time to time by ancillary legislation and investigate such conduct.
Actually, receiving the complaints is a full-time job in
It's a full-time job in and of itself. To investigate corrupt conduct and conduct related to offences created from time to time by ancillary legislation and his own motion.
But the thing is, in most cases, as we said,
to institute criminal prosecution or civil claim.
Yes, but special
in
prosecutors are people who are
if you're doing a what you call a commission of inquiry, that's for a period of time. But this is an ongoing office.
but that's the thing, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So let's say, for example, and this is where it kind of is here and there. If we're investigating one case and another case pops up, is the special prosecutor going to be dealing with both cases, because one can be tedious? So that's why for me,
which is why it can't be a part-time position, because then it means then that you will be, if you're getting multiple cases to investigate, there is no way you can function as a private attorney and still
but
function in the capacity as a special prosecutor.
But that is where it's now limiting your roles that you can do outside of this, as you would have mentioned earlier, right? But again,
it would defeat the purpose of
the legislation needs. No, I mean, let's look at what's happening internationally. You have special prosecutors for this. You have special people who are appointed specifically to deal with this specific.
Yeah, but those
case.
things that you're referring to are usually short-term investigations. We're talking about cases of corruption that may come to the table of this individual during the life. They're appointed for 5 years to begin with. So during the span of that 5 years, you could have several complaints coming to your table of things to investigate. The moment you start talking about investigating, you can't investigate on a part-time basis for you to get the results that the person who's making the complaint is looking for, or for you to accomplish the mandate of you being a special prosecutor. It is hard for it to be.
Is there mention of a team to assist this special investigation?
I know they have an office. Let me just see if I could find that section. They should be entitled to an office to work from, and of course they would. I'm assuming they would have an administrative team as well.
But Kevin, just to add, I think this specific topic needs to be addressed. So I think probably you guys can.
Well, we can
voices or something during the course of the week. You can just highlight to your listeners, if you can get in touch with the ALG to respond to
I will just
to clarify that.
Just to clarify. There was another aspect of it too that I sought clarification on. For example, here, I had asked about the whistleblower aspect of the legislation, the Anti-Corruption Act. So I asked, can members of the public act as whistleblowers and file complaints with the special prosecutor, or is this reserved only for civil servants? The whistleblower protection, I was told, only applies to government workers because they are at risk at punishment. Anyone, including the general public, can report corruption to the special prosecutor. It's just that they're not going to be entitled to the same whistleblower protection as civil servants.
I had a because this comes back to one of the other questions of how these acts are going to maybe conflict with each other. Because let's say, for argument's sake, the Integrity in Life Commission comes together, investigates a minister and his filings or her filings, and they determine that there's nothing wrong with their filings. However, somebody with access to the information within the commission, or maybe a member of the commission themselves, disagreed with the majority of the commission and decide that this information needs to be made public. Does the whistleblower extend to that person?
If the person is a civil servant, if they're a civil servant, yes, they can get whistleblower protection. But if they're just a general member of the public, from the explanation given to me, no. And then also, too, even with the information, there are certain ways in which you handle, if you're working in government service, there are certain responsibilities you have when it comes to information, certain handling of information. So it depends on how you access that information, how you deal with that information. All those things, I would assume, come into play.
We'll take another caller. Good afternoon, caller. Sorry about that. Another one's coming in. Give me a second. Good afternoon, caller. Ooh, we lost both of them. Sorry about that. Jermaine, you sound like you wanted to say something. you're gearing up.
Not really. But it's just to say that it's good to see that the legislations that we're actually talking about now, or the proposed amendments, are actually coming into play now. Right.
We have a caller. Good afternoon, caller.
Yes, just two other things, points I think that are worthy of mention. One, I think that the penalties are much too small. I mean, $30,000 is laughable to a somebody in political office, really. Okay, the idea should be that you should have some measure of deterrence, and I don't think that would deter too many people. Okay.
Is that the anti-corruption in the anti-corruption legislation, or
it was either in that or the IPL that I cited.
Okay.
Where you had, yes, I think it may have included, or there may have been a choice of going to.
Well, the one that I got, and this is in the anti-corruption, it didn't specify an amount; it was left blank. So I guess that was left blank for proposals.
I'm sure 30,000, yeah.
Oh, this one was left blank, so I didn't see any figure in that one.
But the idea should be hefty enough to be a deterrent, okay? And certainly I would imagine that these organs would have some power of subpoena, so you can't just ignore, requests for during an investigation and so on. And then the other thing is the statute of limitations. I think I may have seen a 5-year thing there somewhere, and I think that this should be extended to at least 15 years, because we know that, if for instance, you want to prolong an investigation or a penalty to go beyond the statute of limitations, then really and truly the law is pointless, okay? Because, they could always find a way. And that's what I said. There will always be loopholes that you can get through, and that is why it's important that you don't have to get perfection out of the door, out of the gate, but get something in place that you can change as you go along as you see problems popping up, but at least get something going. I think that's the important thing.
Yes,
all right,
definitely.
Thank you, caller.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I agree, and I want to concur with Jermaine as well that at least we're getting some movements now in some of these matters. And what I'm hoping for is that there will be a lot of public engagement, and not just from the side of the AG, for example, coming or having town hall meetings or coming on shows like these, but because he did say at the press conference, the Prime Minister's press conference the last time, that the drafts were sent out. He hadn't gotten any feedback as yet. So I'm hoping that people are using the opportunity, and this is not just reserved for the Media Association or the Bar Association or the Chamber of Commerce. Anybody can go on the SKNS website, look at the legislation, and offer your comments. If you are just a lay person, we're all lay people, most of us, and we're not lawyers. But if you don't understand it, ask somebody who has a knowledge of it, or a lawyer or somebody who can explain it to you and explain what is meant by these things, and then you offer your input, because we've asked for integrity in public life, we've asked for transparency, we've asked for these things. There's an attempt now at it. I think we should take full advantage of it.
Because they're all interlinked, and this is what people need to understand.
Yes, they are.
Freedom of information is interlinked with integrity in public life, which is interlinked with anti-corruption. So it's good to see that they're all in the ear right now, and that they're all in front of the people to make a determination of what they want included and what they want not included. Because, and one of the things I admire about St. Kitts and Nevis is that St. Kitts and Nevis is small. I live here, I know the person who lives over there. Right. Even though somebody told me I live in St. Martin. Right. But the point is, as a small society, we must have these legislations in place where the more bigger developed countries will look down at St. Kitts and say, yes, this is a model of society that we want to emulate.
Not just in place, but operationalize
and function. And we must utilize them when they become operational. It's not to say, well, okay, we now have it, and then we don't use it.
Right.
We need to use it.
And one of the things I know, there's a anti-corruption conference on this week. It starts on Tuesday, and even though you don't hear much about places like St. Kitts and Nevis and St. Lucia because we are grouped with the OECS, we are discussed in these forums, right? Because you have to, bring these small countries together to make a determination on what direction the OECS is or where the OECS is. So even though you don't hear about an individual OECS territory, we're still being looked at, And then when you hear, for example, blacklisting and all these things, all of these things are interlinked. So when we, as a small island state, put certain legislations in place like these, you get a good rating. So when you see we writing about certain stories, you have to ask yourself, what are the implications of this? Why are they reporting on this? And it goes back to a point I was making earlier. One of the issues that we have in St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, Dominica, the BVI, is that because of our small societies, we look at things through a political lens, right? And because we look at things through a political lens, when Labour is in office, my supporters believe everything is well. When Unity is in office, my supporters see everything as being good. But then nobody wants to stand up and say, hey, we want this to be in place. This must be in place, right? But how long we don't look at things through that specific lens, take off the political colors, we will still have the issues that are going to be out there. So to see these legislations coming to the fore, even though some of it was in place before the current administration took over, it is us building. So we have the platform that were, for example, the Freedom of Information legislation that was passed. We have something to work with. Now the current administration is going to be building on that, and if there's another administration, you build on that. So it's good to see that we are actually making strides and improving democracy in St. Kitts and Nevis.
I think you hit on one of the oldest problems or challenges with democracy, which is actual, actionable, tangible bipartisanry. Because a lot of the times we try and push bipartisanry and we try to support that it's a thing, but then we decide, hey, this was implemented previously. I like it, but may like the fact that we're going with the same idea, so we're going to slap a fresh coat of paint on it. It's the same thing. We're going to a fresh coat of paint on it and call it something different and move forward with it in that way, instead of, as you mentioned, building upon.
You know who made a valid point? Trevor Noah, and one of his videos from his shows behind the scenes popped up on my timeline, and he was making a valid point. The U.S. they pass. It's so easy to pass every legislation that we want. Yes, we pass this, we pass that. But then when it came to gun reform, we can't do it. We can't do it. But then when they do decide to go to Congress with the legislation, one party don't want it, but then it passed. And his point was, let us pass something to deal with the problem at hand. Then, when another problem comes up, we look at it, we modify the law that we passed before to deal with that problem until we get to perfection. Right. So right now, I think that's where we are in terms of passing legislation to tackle the issue. Yes, there will be loopholes. There are always loopholes. You're not perfect in
and
whatever.
Conflicts.
Exactly. So now, when we pass this, 2 or 3 years down the line, we realize, okay, we need to pass another amendment to tighten this loophole that we have here. Right. So, okay, good. We tighten this one. 50 years down the road, we can say, what wrong with these people 50 years ago? But I didn't see that this was a problem. Now, we deal with that issue. Right. But not dealing with an issue, and then we complain that this is an issue that has to be dealt with. And I think that's...
I will even add to that, and just to the point you made about political partisanship and be able to remove the political lens. It is a major problem, and especially as media workers that we're confronted with it from time to time, because when you try to do investigative work or work that sheds light on situations, if it doesn't favor a political side, you're automatically seen as being partisan, when that's not the case. You're just doing your job. And it would apply on either. It doesn't matter which side it is. It applies on both sides. We get pushback from people from both sides, because once people do not see sometimes even what some of this legislation is trying to do, and even the laws that we not laws, but the stories that we try to do, they don't see it as, okay, you're just doing your job. They see it as, well, you're being political or you're being partisan, and that's not the case. If people are able to be pragmatic and rational and look at, because one of the things that will come up, and especially when these legislation go into effect, one of the things that will come up is that when, let's say, someone decides that they're going to utilize the provisions in the Anti-Corruption Act to report a matter, and that matter is being pursued and investigated, you can now come and say, well, okay, well, this is being done as a political witch hunt. No, the legislation was there. The legislation, you asked for it, you called for it. Now, if it turns out that one of your favorite politician or public official is being investigated, you can now cry and say, well, it's witch hunt and it's politics and blah, blah, blah. No, it is the law. It is what you asked for. You asked for transparency. You asked for public integrity in public life. You asked for anti-corruption.
And good governance.
And good governance. This is all part of the good governance agenda.
And that's the thing. I don't like to have, I love people to criticize me. I accept it. But sometimes when you hear the argument that why you need to do that story, or the story could have been done differently, or why didn't you go investigate angle. This person when they were in office? So, those things comes through a political lens. But then, why do you think with the Fourth Estate, why do you think we hear these legislation? I mean, for example, if Mr. Abel is in office, Mr. Abel was in government, he got his supporters. His supporters will like him. But nobody wants to stand up to Mr. Abel because the part sweet he get in honey. Like Mr. Abel driving a nice, Andre driving a nice vehicle because, he in government with Mr. Abel. But then nobody ain't gonna want to say, Mr. Abel, you're doing wrong. Right. Andre ain't gonna stop to say, Mr. Abel, you're doing wrong because he's enjoying it. Now the media comes in and report, well, Mr. Abel, you are involved in corrupt practices. Nice, big, sexy headline in the story, in the news.
You become public enemy number one.
Exactly. But it's all you're doing is highlighting the issues that are out there that's important to the people. Now, Kevon comes in government, and Kevon is doing something, and the media reports that Kevon is doing something wrong. Kevon supporters but say, no. Y'all didn't say the same thing when Mr. Abel was in office. Right? But then the opposition will come and say, yes! We always know he was like that. Right. But you see, so that's the divide. So people when they're looking at these issues, have to look at them with an open mind, with an open perspective that this is what is the purpose of this report, right? I mean, trust me, we've done a lot of investigative work, right? And the level of work that we do, a lot of people in St. Kitts would not be happy with, right? We have been told, hey, you guys need to do some more digging, come up with documents, facts, so that we can substantiate this. But how can we get those facts and documents to substantiate it if we don't have access to the information? If we don't have whistleblower legislation where somebody could come and say, hey, Jeremy reported that, the project only cost 10 million when in fact, he got a little thing at the side. So those are the sort of things that we in the media do, but a lot of people don't like it because it does not benefit them.
And Jeremy, talk about criticism. I personally don't mind the criticisms. I sift out what is relevant because there are some criticisms that I think are legit,
valid, yes,
and valid. And I would tell people, point taken. I'll look at that next time, or if
I'll
they
ask
say, ask this question. You know what? Yeah, I didn't think of that. Good idea. I will ask a question the next time I have the opportunity. So some criticisms are quite fine, and I embrace them. And there are some that really don't make any sense, to be quite honest, if I would just be blunt. So I just take the wheat from the tares and just understand that as part of being a journalist, that is part of the territory. You are going to get criticisms. I just saw a gentleman just from an assignment I came from was saying that we should ask him hard questions. So I asked him for a suggestion. He wasn't able to give me one. So these things happen. And, I have no problems at all with it. It like I said, it comes with the territory. But again, you just have to know what is valid and what is just people just expressing their grouse.
Yeah, and one of the things, right, somebody's going to ask, why y'all didn't report on this story?
Because we didn't know. I'm sorry, word on the street does not work. Word on the street for journalists is a jumping point to get more information.
Exactly.
It is not the story.
But not only that, right? Some people make some assertions, claims, suggestions, however you want to describe it. But the minute you put that out there, you're seeing yourself sitting in front of a magistrate. Right. Let's be frank. Some people make some claims and don't provide the substance to back those claims.
And they're not there with you, when you're
yeah, they're cheering you on. Go report this.
When you know they're not there with you in court.
Exactly. Right. I have a saying, I like to eat at the end of the month. but I ain't got much fat. Right.
But being a journalist is martyr service, German. You know this.
Yeah, but not to get sued.
Mr. Brown. Right now I don't have enough fat to go without a month. To go a month without eating. Right. But that's a running joke. But the point is, not everything that's being said we can just run with. Right. You hear these claims that this person said this and this person spent this money on this corrupt practices. Give us the facts. Right. I know in one of the projects that I did recently, every sentence of the project
was fact checked.
Yeah, exactly. Literally, it was fact checked.
Fact checked, yes.
Right. And you cannot go to press without something being properly fact checked because nobody wants to go to court. Let's be frank. Right. That's time and money, and then you still have to come back to publish.
Right. But it also costs you your credibility and integrity as a journalist if you end up in court. And
exactly.
Without that, you are nothing in the journalism field.
Exactly.
And I like to say I rather get it last and right than to get it first and wrong. So, but mistakes will happen.
Yeah,
always. I think
because you're human.
Always.
Right, mistakes will happen. But the type of mistake is a problem. Right. I mean, yes, there's some mistakes that you can, but going to press and getting sued or dragged over the coals for a problem that could have been avoided is, for me, is a problem.
And if we really want to talk about investigative work, even the sources themselves have to be fact-checked. A
Yes.
document has to be fact-checked to see the validity of the document. Was it forged? Was it doctored? Is it a picture of a document? The picture of the document most of the times isn't enough because it's very easy to doctor a picture of a document. So that can't be seen as a source. An audio file with an unidentified voice, you have to fact-check that audio voice. Is it authenticated? Was it altered in any way? The same thing with video. So if you really want to go into what investigative work entails, it is not a quick process.
Exactly. And that's why I tell people, sometimes some of the criticisms that are leveled against media workers are not valid. Some are valid, but some are not necessarily
And some of it
valid.
is based out of ignorance, really.
But
They don't know,
true.
they don't know.
Because unless, as I say, unless you're sitting in the hot seat, you wouldn't know how hot the seat is. Right? No, because we go to press sometimes, and you have to go do a news for 12 o'clock, Kevin. You have a news for 6 o'clock. You know that sometimes you have to make a judgment call whether or not this story can go or not. You have to wait for some additional information, especially when you're calling Jane, Doe, Steve, Rich to get a comment to substantiate this. But then you can't go to press with it because it's not a substantiated story, but it's a big story. Right. But then again, do I give Kevin 3 weeks to chase after one story to properly investigate the story?
3 weeks? You mean like 6 months?
6 months.
Right.
6 months, honestly.
Yeah, that's maybe generous.
No, some of
3
the
weeks.
best work I've done is within 3 to 6 months on one story. The one that we did on CBI, for example, it took us the better part of 6 months.
Yeah, it took us the better part of, and even my group, we didn't get to finish completely the way we wanted to do it because our group focused on the buildings, the mysterious buildings that pop up and just don't finish. Getting information on those buildings was disastrously hard. We had to figure out who were the owners, who were the brokers, when did the project start, why did it stop, the amount of times. There's
and finding supporting documentation.
Finding supporting documentation, the amount of names that a specific property I was looking at on Nevis changed, the name of the property changed, the developers changed about 3 times, and it still fell through. The realtors changed about twice. So it's not a short, quick process when you're thinking about investigative work.
And that's the thing people don't understand. And the challenges, and it's the biggest challenge and obstacle, 2 challenges and obstacles that we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis when it comes to journalism. And to some extent, some of the small islands. Our newsrooms are small, and we're called upon to do more and more and more and more and more and more realistically. Right. So we cannot always get it right to do that investigative work that we want to get done, right? And people out there say, "Oh yeah, don't do this. You guys don't do that." It's fair, and it's correct, but you have to put context to it, and I think that's what is oftentimes missing in the criticisms that we get.
Well, let me add to that as well, and from the Media Association standpoint, because we understand the importance of investigative work. But it's not something that's going to happen just like that. Investigative journalism, just like any other form of journalism, is a business. It requires cost. There's a cost attached to it, and it is not something that is necessarily cheap. So what the association is looking to do even more going into 2023 is partnering with the Media Institute of the Caribbean through the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, because what they do is that they have access to funding, or they can help us to access funding to work on certain projects. Now, once the funders, and the funders tend to be, non-profit groups, international groups like the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism, that's based in the U.S. You have USAID sometimes funding certain initiatives of the Media Institute of the Caribbean. So we get funding from them through the MIC to tackle certain particular issues. So like this investigative story that you're talking about, Kevon, that we worked on, was also funded through the MIC. So the journalists who worked on that were paid extra to work on that particular story. And that's how it's going to work, because the truth of the matter is the media houses by themselves some may not be prioritizing investigative journalism, and that's because there's a cost to it, and they can't afford it, and such they're not going to really pay much attention to it. And so for that work to be done, you have to get funding from outside of St. Kitts and Nevis. So what we want to do is to give journalists an opportunity that are members of the association to get the required training through the MIC, and then through them get training opportunities to work on investigative stories, so that they themselves can also get a little extra money as well, and you can do good work in the process.
Yes.
Because it costs money. It's not cheap. You can't just expect that you're gonna hire a reporter to work on a story for 6 months, and that reporter is not going to get paid. Where's the money going to come from?
Right.
So, and then not only that, you also need money to access certain things, certain information that you need to get. It doesn't come free. You have to pay for it. You might need to hire a photographer or a videographer or somebody to help you capture certain things to make your story complete. Those things come at a cameraman is not going to walk off the street and do it for you for free. You have to pay them. It's a job. They do that for a living.
That's another thing that we have to take into consideration. Some people, because when you think about sources, you have to be able to incentivize your sources to actually give you information. If you can't pay your sources, if this information could possibly cost them their job, in any way, shape, or form, if you can't give them something to live off of until they could, then there's no reason for that source to have that conversation.
It's similar to what happened with the WikiLeaks story, for example. When the WikiLeaks story came out, the backstory behind that is, which newspaper was it? I forgot the name of the newspaper. Oh, it was The Guardian in the UK. And one of the reasons why The Guardian especially does a lot of investigative work is they actually have an investigative unit. Al Jazeera, The Guardian, all these major news corporations, they have an investigative unit just to do investigative journalism. So, in fact, I was on a training just last month in Trinidad on investigating corruption in the Caribbean. And one of the facilitators works at the ICIJ, which is the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. He was one of the journalists that worked on the Panama Papers. He basically does 2 stories a year. For the entire year, he's paid to work on 2 stories. And those 2 stories are major investigative pieces. So basically, he has a whole year. Let's call it 6 months then. 6 months to one story,
and
6 months to the other story.
Yeah.
So he basically, he works, he gets paid full time, and he only produces 2 stories a year.
The dream. Well, gentlemen, we I know I would have pissed off Sharon and she come down and was time.
Yeah, we're out of time.
Yes, we've been out of time for about 25 minutes. But the discussion is necessary, and I think the discussion needs to continue, to be truthful. And I'm hoping that the Media Association will be willing to come on more often to speak about these important issues. But thank you so much for the listening audience. I'm sorry we couldn't take any more calls, but thank you so much for tuning into our discussion here on Inside the News on Win FM 98.9. Stay tuned, and we'll see you again.